Here's my full process and breakdown for making animations like this. Now, if you're struggling for ideas or inspiration, this makes this stage even more important. It's a good idea to hop on Instagram, Pinterest, or Behance and see what's out there. Now, I think this is super important as it will often spark an idea or give you some kind of word association to play with that you can then build an idea from. Once you have your idea and you've already got some inspiration from Behance or Instagram or Pinterest, you've kind of generated your own mood board, and then it's a good time to think about opening Illustrator and creating a storyboard. Now, when storyboarding, just flesh out your ideas and then sort of build on them, but I always start in black and white, and this is for two reasons. First of all, anything that looks good and is designed well in black and white will look even better when you put the right colors and effects on it. And second of all, I suck with color palettes, so I'd rather just leave that till last. Now you have your storyboard and you've separated your assets correctly in Illustrator, it's time to move to After Effects. Now, it's always a good idea to get a rough cut dialed in first, and that's exactly what I always do. And if you're working with music, it might also generate some further ideas for how things might move, and it will just give you a general idea of how the animation might be timed and the general pacing of everything. You don't need to worry about being too precious here, as the good stuff comes a little later on. So you might be wondering, how exactly have I animated this and what's all the good stuff? So on your second kind of pass, you want to be taking care of all your easing. So you'll notice here on this spring, I've separated all the parts here just to make it easier to animate. So I could move everything individually. So my top is separate here. I've got the spring separate, the base separate, just so I could move everything and give it that effect of when it's sort of scaling down, that the spring was actually being compressed, like this ball had some weight to it, or someone was on the other side of this pinball machine and kind of pulling that lever back to give it that sort of feeling that there's going to be momentum there. Now the next shot is again just a match cut, and we cut into these sides, and all I've done is kept the actual bottom sides and just kind of nulled those up to this main camera. So rather than using cameras, I actually prefer to use nulls, and that's just my workflow. I don't really like using 3D layers that much, and if I can, I'd prefer to link nulls up. So we have an extra sort of Y movement on this null, despite moving the ball as well, and that kind of gives us that look that the ball's actually moving in the air. But if I kind of took that off, all we'd be seeing is a slight camera move upwards and the ball would look so stationary, but having these keyframes slightly offset gives it that look that it's kind of flying in the air. Now the next shot again is pretty much the same, we just match cut to it, and all these bouncy thing, I don't know what you call them in a pinball machine, I'll be honest, but all these kind of like bouncy things are literally just basic keyframes. There's nothing special about them. So I have one that's the actual layer and then one that's like a shadow underneath it, and all that has is just a fill and a blur just to soften that out, as without it, it looked a bit strange. It just kind of adds something in that bottom right there. These are just parented to each other, so the shadow always sticks with the layer and you only have to animate one layer that way. And all that's happening is as this ball hits, I'm just kind of animating the position. You can actually see there's a little error there. Really, they should be separate, but you can kind of just see that's just general overshoot, and thinking about the rhythm of the animation and how everything would actually move in real life. And that's the important thing. You've got to give it that feel of weightiness, that feel of motion, add everything like the anticipation and the overshoot. Like this ball's got something to it, and it would actually affect and be affected by the objects in the world around it. Then we've got these arrows too, and what I've done here is, because these arrows are actually just the same thing and I use them quite a few times through the animation, I've actually pre-comped this, and all this is doing is changing fill color to look like each one is lighting up, and then I've added a loop out expression to it as well. And then I just have this sequence that I can rotate around. As you'll notice, I've got it on the next shot as well, and what I've done is I've cut it on the cut so that the sequence still remains the same. And then we have it at the end as well, and again that's pre-comp too. So pre-comps are great for reusable assets, and that's where they're really, really useful. Anything that you would reuse and then you think you might change, you're only going to then have to change once. And that's why my ball is a pre-comp as well, and that ball is the exact same pre-comp. It's just got position and rotation animation on it. That's the only difference. Now again, this is all controlled through a null acting as the camera, and this is the one doing the movement across and then the movement down. So the next shot is again a match cut, and once more controlled by a null. And we actually have two nulls on this one. And the extra null is actually creating this X and Y movement to sway the kind of camera. So if I unlink that, you'll kind of see the difference it makes. So that null is, my camera 3 null is just parented to my sway null, and that's just moving the X position across. And without that, it kind of looks a bit boring and a bit bland. So I added that in again just to make it feel like we're following the ball. It just adds an extra layer to the animation. Now the light sources here are just 2 lights. One of them, they're both set to add, and it's the exact same layer. One of them is actually blurred just to create that softer effect around the edge. And then the other one on the top has just a turbulent noise to add a bit of depth and a bit of variation into the color, so it's not just one unified light color. And that's the same in the lights throughout the scene, same at the start as well. This is duplicate lights, fast blur, and a turbulent noise. And at the end as well, we have the exact same, and in this shot as well. So once more, we're sort of panning down and going down with a match cut, and all I'm doing on this one is zooming out, and we're hitting that little wedge thing there. And again, it's all in the keyframes. We sort of move over, hit the wedge thing again, and then we match cut back out to the scene. Now, I actually built this as 2 separate scenes and ended up merging at the end just to kind of add a bit more depth to the animation, because originally these 2 wedges weren't going to be in this end scene, but it looked really strange sort of cutting from this part where we're zoomed in to then not seeing them in motion. So it worked out quite nice. But it's always important to go with the flow of your animation and not just necessarily stick to the storyboard if it's one of your personal projects. You've kind of got to do what's right, and sometimes it's good to deviate from the storyboard to kind of get a feel for the motion, keep that rhythm going. The animation on this is, again, all hand animated, just rotations. There's nothing fancy going on here. We've got the same arrow light sequencing as well. And this ball just kind of comes up and arcs, and it's all again just in the easing of the keyframes to kind of give it that weight. So this is a generic kind of ball easing, but it just kind of adds that weight. And again, everything is controlled through nulls with the camera as well. And then when we get to the end, all I've done is kind of done the, I knew I was going to loop it, so the end kind of positions down to match that part at the front, so we kind of have that consistent looking match cut. Now, when we have our kind of base animation and we're really happy with that easing, it's time to really take it up a notch. And now I'm going to discuss all the stuff that kind of does that and how we can really add that extra 10% to the animation. So let's just turn back on our glow, our noise, and our chromatic aberration. So I've got a deep glow layer, and I've got a noise layer just to add some grain, and we've got a chromatic aberration layer. And I'm just going to set that to full. And you can kind of see the difference. If I just screenshot this and then we turn those off and then take a look at the difference, it really changes the color, obviously. Just the chromatic aberration and the noise just really adds something else, I think. So it's always nice to maybe add some glow, some grading, some noise at least, and then chromatic aberration can be taken care of with a plugin that's free called Quick Chromatic Aberration. It's way easier, and I've talked about that in one of my other videos, so I'll leave a link to that. Now, my ball here is pretty interesting, and this is a method that I saw on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I can't quite remember who it was, but I'll put it on screen now because I'll find out. And my original ball actually looked nothing like this. My original ball was just a gradient, and it kind of just looked like that. But a lot of these Orby balls have kind of been going around, so this is why I pre-comped this. Now all this is my original ball layer is here, and then I've added another one underneath and glowed it with a blur, done a fill and a blur to add that kind of outer glow. We've then added 2 little rim lights around the edge, kind of like as though a bit of light is hitting the edge of it. And all this is a time expression, and they're just opposites, and they're just running around. So if I just solo them 2, they're just running around like that, and it just kind of gives the idea that there's some light around the scene. The thing that makes it look really nice is this reflection objects comp, and you can kind of see the difference when I turn that on. So this is fastbox blurred, and it's set to overlay like my rim lights. And if we dive in here, it's just a bunch of shape layers with an echo on, and they're just wiggling on the position to quite a high amount. But they're they're just doing that. And then we're kind of blurring that and then matting that to our main ball layer. And it kind of gives a look, there's some stuff in the ball moving around, and we're kind of hitting reflections, and adds another dimension to the artwork and to the layers. Now my next shot, I've got this interesting one here, and all this is it's the same kind of ball setup, and I've added these speed lines into the ball, and then I've also got a speed lines pre-comp on the back of this as well, so it kind of looks like the ball is moving through them rather than just being on top. And this is just a solid that's been duped with a turbulent noise and the evolution being animated, and then a tint and a turbulent display. So the tint is just changing the color from white to a colored variation, and then the displace is just kind of giving it a bit of wiggle, bit more to it rather than just being straight up. And the evolution expression with a time just kind of takes care of everything, and again, kind of automating with expressions, it kind of makes things much easier. So at the end of this, we've kind of got the next scene that we transition into. What I've done here is we've got this kind of ball ping-ponging between these scenes, and on its own it looked a bit strange, and I didn't like the look of it, and it needed some secondary motion. So for that, what I've done is I've added just a simple brightness and contrast to the layer, and then animated that for when the ball hits, and that just lights up as though it has been hit, which is kind of nice. And then I've also got this burst pre-comp going on as soon as it gets hit at the same time, and again that's pre-comp, and it's just a pink layer that I've toned down. It's just a scale up on a circle, and then I've just toned that down, set it to add, and reduce the opacity. To add some reflections in this scene, you'll notice we've got these reflections in the ball. I've created a rail reflection layer that I've used as a matte, which is basically just my rail, which is animating across, and it's just blurred out to kind of look softer, and it just mats to the ball, but it actually moves left and right, so the reflections are going opposite to give it that kind of feel that the ball is moving around on that rail and it's not just too static. And again, just thinking about that secondary motion and how it would kind of look in real life, and how the light might hit. On the next scene, again, I've kind of replicated this brightness and contrast on these bounce pillars, and we've just duped that and used the exact same effect. Added some rotation to the ball, and then we match cut to the last one. The flippers once more, I've got that brightness and contrast on as well. Now that's essentially everything that I did to make this project, but your After Effects journey doesn't have to end there, and you can continue by watching this video here. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.